Well, hi, everybody. I am here today with my good friend and colleague, Christine Sturgis. Chrissy is a licensed professional counselor in the St. Louis area. And recently she appeared on My Out Loud Voice and did an incredible article for us called The Power of Change. Let me tell you a little bit about Chrissy. Not only is she my sister friend, we have been doing life and ministry and mission together for over 2 decades, but she is an incredible therapist. She is deeply involved in the community. She's also the co-founder of an organization called A Seat at the Table that works with underserved and under-resourced 18 to 25-year-olds to help them get a hand up in creating the life that they have been created to live, with counseling, family, all of the things that we take for granted maybe in our lives that so many of us actually didn't grow up having. They seek to provide that. And so I could not think of anybody better to speak on the power of change. So welcome, Chrissy.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a
Thanks for
pleasure.
being
Thanks for
here.
asking me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would love to dive right in. I would love to talk about this amazing article that you wrote about the power of change, the
Thank
work
you.
that you do with your clients, what it is that you see with your clients, and how you see this idea of faith and therapy weaving together. In particular, what that means for those of us who are coming in with relational difficulties and being stuck in some of those old patterns like you talked about in your article. So just kind of, if you'll tell us the heart behind the article and the heart behind your practice in and of itself.
Well, I'll start there because I worked as a pastor in a local church for a lot of years, and I've been a believer in Jesus for a very long time. Um, and the older I've gotten, the more I've worked with people, the more I am blown away by the miraculous nature of how we are designed for healing, of the way that our brain is capable of change up until we die, right? You can be 90 years old and want to change a habit, and you can access that mechanism for change that's been designed into you and wired for your good. So that is some of the passion that I have around this intersection of faith and therapy. I think the two work best hand in hand. I think you can't divorce emotional health from spiritual health. They just seem to come together like this, and when one suffers, the other suffers, and it goes both ways. And so I think that this more recent generation for whom therapy has become a little bit more mainstream, I just see such potential in that for healing, and even generational shifts like you've written about in Generations Deep, that we can slowly impact the legacy that's been given to us by generations ahead of us by accessing good therapy and the Holy Spirit.
I love that. Two things that you just said I want to touch on. One is just how you talked about this divorce of emotional health and spiritual health, right? And
Yeah.
yet we sort of have been conditioned somewhat, particularly when you talk about the generations before us, but
Yeah.
even so much in our generation and a little bit in the generation now, it's changing. The tide is slowly turning. However, there is this thing in the church where we want to almost ignore emotion. We want
Yeah.
to push it off. And so I'd love for you to speak into that a little bit. And then secondly, speak into, which is part of what you write about, this whole idea of slowing down, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is so important. So if you'll first kind of talk about pushing back on that idea, why first of all, I know why we're told to just ignore our feelings, right? Like, but we're not just spirits walking around in this world, right? We are mental, emotional, physical beings. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that piece. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there's this misunderstanding that toughness is about powering through those emotions that we deem as harder to feel or experience, or are not always harder, but maybe those that feel more vulnerable, that feel weaker and harder to express. And I think when we rush past those emotions, when we sort of do this powering through thing because because we gain affirmation from it, because it's unpleasant to feel those feelings, when it's hard to do that work. I think when we rush past them, the feelings, from what I've experienced with clients, they don't go away. We can stuff them down, but they don't stay put. They have to be processed. Our brain has to know, has to do the hard work of looking at them, finding understanding, making meaning, and then being able to store them appropriately. I compare it often to the way that when we save a document on our computer, if we need fast access to it, we put it on our desktop, right? But that's not always where something belongs. Sometimes we need it to be in a long-term place where it's not cluttering everything else up. And so we go find a folder somewhere down in our hard drive and we put it there. Our brains do something similar. When something is dangerous for us or we need fast access to it, it gets stored in a more immediate place. What we need to do with some of the feelings that we experience, and especially some of the harder experiences that maybe cause sadness or what is things that would maybe fall into a more general category of trauma. What we need to do is be able to think through them, to feel those emotions, to make sense of them, if sense is to be made, and to store it in the long term so that it's not constantly popping up and interrupting a healthy process of thought.
I like that. And how does slowing down play into that?
Yeah. What I think I see with my clients often is I want to make those changes. I've now seen that there's some dysfunction or some maladaptive nature to the patterns that I'm in, and I want to change them. But what has occurred in them is they've been in that pattern for so long that that pathway just gets kind of hardwired, etched into their brains, and it's very hard to challenge it. And what happens in those more hardwired spaces is things become reflexive. They become very we don't think cognitively about what we're doing. We just jump into a behavior because it's always worked for us in the past, right? But sometimes then as we grow up and we're in our adult lives, the patterns that protected us maybe as a child become maladaptive in our adult lives. And now my tendencies to either hide or flare up, or the ways that I defended myself before start to interrupt and interfere with healthy emotional interactions in other relationships. So if we can figure out how to slow the sequence of events in our brain down, we start to be able to better understand the reaction and address it in an intentional way rather than letting that reflex get away from us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I like how you approach that in the article that you wrote as well. And there's a lot of tools that we can give our clients to help us do that, right?
So many tools. Yeah.
So many tools, so many tools. One of the things that we are going to make available to our readers is a tool that you talk about in your article called a feelings wheel. Do you want to talk a little bit about, oh, look, there it is. In all of its rainbow glory.
It's colorful, awesome. It's pretty.
I love it. I love it.
Useful.
Yeah. Oh, so useful, right? You want to talk a little bit about what it is, why it's helpful, and how we can utilize it in this journey?
Sure. Yeah. So the wheel is a relatively simple design. And you can find them everywhere. I've seen them made into pillows. I've seen them as refrigerator magnets, as phone stickers, whatever. I like to just print them out and I laminate them. And I can't tell you how many of these I've given away to clients because they're so helpful. What we learn typically as children is a very limited language of emotions. We know sad, we know mad, we know maybe frustrated, we know happy, right? And we lean into those brighter emotions. So what this wheel does is it takes those big emotions and it locates them here in the center. But what you see then in the layers that move out are more and more precise wording. So instead of just joyful, maybe I'm feeling excited, maybe I'm energetic, maybe I'm playful. And then as we move out even more, I'm fascinated, I am amused, and so we're just pulling those words out and trying to put more and more precise language around our emotions so that we can better articulate that, and not for ourselves, but also within a relationship. It helps us to place a language around it so that we can better make meaning of what it is that we're feeling.
A couple things I love about that is sometimes we just feel it, but we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So we can have our clients take the feelings wheel and
Mhm.
say, and when they feel the feeling, they can look at it and see what resonates.
Yeah.
That can help. And I also
Yeah.
love,
I go ahead.
and
Go
I
ahead.
love the design in that the center is so obvious. Those colors are so obvious, but we have to look a little bit harder as the colors get a little bit
Yeah.
lighter. We have to look a little bit harder to
Yeah.
really recognize what they are. And I like that thoughtful
Yeah.
design too.
I do too. And it's simple enough, all of us can kind of grasp it. And so what I usually tell people to do is just put it someplace where you see it all the time. Put it
Mm.
on your bathroom mirror, stick it up in the dash of your car. Don't read it while you're driving. But but when you
There's a
pull through a
disclaimer,
drive-through and you're
legal
going to pause
disclaimer
for
right there.
you can pull that baby out and make some meaning out of those emotions.
I love it. I love it. And actually that makes me think about when you say like have it available where you see it often, like
Mhm.
to your point earlier about different how you've seen it in different ways. You've seen it in a
Yeah.
pillow and a sticker.
Yeah.
My thought when you were saying that was like mirror clings, like a window or a
Yes.
mirror cling that you could do
Yeah.
like bathroom mirror or
Absolutely. Yeah. And then you could, to have multiple, to have it on my bathroom mirror, but also maybe on my rearview mirror.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
so just to have it in different places, especially as we are learning this new language, right? I
Mhm.
like to remind people that whenever we learn a new language, the first time we speak it can feel awkward. If you've
Mhm.
ever tried to learn to speak Spanish or Chinese or German or whatever, the first time I try to communicate with that new language is awkward. My accent is probably off. I'm hoping that I'm saying the thing that I want to say, and it can feel similar in learning this new language of feelings. And so the first time I go to my spouse and say, I'm mad, but I'm actually very frustrated with you. And as I'm trying to articulate that, it can be a little bit awkward. And I might have my feelings wheel handy and be looking at it as I go, right? Just like I might have a booklet with the Spanish language handy for me when I'm trying that
I
out
love
new.
that.
So I think just to know that, give yourself time. Give yourself
Yeah.
time. It's a new language and you're just learning it, but it's going to be helpful to you. And I think in overall, you're going to be communicating better at the end of it.
That is so good. So what is the one takeaway that you would like people to come away with if they don't remember anything else about the great article, which hopefully they'll remember more than one thing. But if they don't, what is one thing you want them to walk away from the article knowing?
I think I would say maybe the most important thing that I want to communicate is that you are not doomed to the patterns that have been either created in you or that you've created in yourself. You're not stuck there. It may feel like that sometimes, but there are really ways that you can change, and some of them are miraculous. And when you start to make those changes and begin to see the differences in your relationships and in your the ways that you live and love and interact with people, it will be worth the hard work.
I love that so much. I love that so much. Okay, so before we go, speaking of change and breaking generational cycles and learning new languages, give us like a 30,000-foot view of A Seat at the Table and the work that you do there.
Yeah. So A Seat at the Table began as something that my husband and I just did. We were not a nonprofit. We have 4 sons of our own, and over the course of bringing those boys up, God brought other kids into our family. They were kids who just needed a different atmosphere in which to grow. And so we had like 5 other young men that sort of were raised alongside our own boys. And as they all started to get up and older and out of the house, it felt like God was inviting us to do something a little bigger with that. And a seat at the table was born. We became a nonprofit, and now we are looking around. We've got, there will never be a shortage of young adults. We work with ages 18 to 25. There will never be a shortage of really good, high potential kids who are running out of resources as they grow into their adult years. Youth organizations, foster program, they start to age out of all of those things. And a lot of them find themselves either homeless or couch surfing or just in insecure spaces. And so a seat at the table, we try to get our arms around them. We invite them into a family situation. We have 2 larger houses. My husband and I live in one house where we have 4 young men that live with us. We have a women's house up in Ferguson, Missouri, that will eventually have 4 young women that live there with another set of house parents. But we're also looking very hard at parents who are willing to do it just the way we started doing it, that in your own home, you have space, if you have shelter, if you have the resources, if you have the love to take in an extra young adult or 2, we would love to resource you. So you pull them in, they live with you, they eat around your table, you help them with that, whatever are the things that you're able to help with. And then a seat at the table will come around you with the resources that you are lacking and help to provide those things. We can coach, we provide counseling, and that's a super crucial part of the program. We require the kids who come into the program to go through some counseling because we found that it's just so good for them, and
Yes.
they find healing for a lot of trauma that has occurred to them almost universally.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the organization in a nutshell. We work all on private donations, and it's just a really cool picture of how God can create family outside of bloodlines, and how we can love
Yes.
others as Christ loved us, and it's super rewarding.
Yeah.
As someone who's done the parenting for a lot of years, I can't say strongly enough how rewarding it is to step into the life of a young person and watch the trajectory shift toward the positive.
That's beautiful. And so I love that not only do you have like the women's house and the men's house, but then also to create these other parental environments where these kids can go and maybe have that experience for the first time, that truly family unit coming around them, but then also to train and equip and resource those parents so they're not like out there on an island alone. They're still part of the organization. So I think that's really beautiful. So if people want to get a hold of you, either for counseling or to learn more about a seat at the table, we have information in your bio, which is at the bottom of the article, but also they can find you where?
I'm practicing at Chesterfield Counseling Associates. That's in Chesterfield, Missouri, near 6440 and Olive Road. And so the email will be posted there, right? You can click on those links.
Absolutely.
A seat at the table home headquarters is in the Shaw neighborhood of St. Louis, and we're at aseatathetable.org. So you can easily contact us through that website as well.
That's so cool. Well, thanks for taking some time to share your heart with us and your wisdom. We really appreciate you. And I'm certain that everybody here will be hearing from you again. So thanks for taking some time today.
Thank you, Gina. Thanks for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.